Welcome back. You're watching World Talks and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Thursday is a big day as the EU Council will make decisions that will shape the short-term and long-term future and security of the continent as EU ministers meet in Brussels. They're holding strategic debates on Ukraine and the use of frozen Russian assets, the next multi-annual financial framework, enlargement, and the geo-economic situation in the EU. To talk latest developments on what is a very hot topic today is Dr. Tinatin Akhvlediani, Research Fellow at the Center for European Policy Studies, also known as CEPS. Thank you so much for joining me here on World Talks.
Thank you so much for having me and covering this issue closely.
Pleasure is all mine. So let's start with the latest. We've heard from Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who upon his arrival for the European Union summit in Brussels said that the choice Europe is facing is money today, quote, or blood tomorrow. How is that message resonating inside the room, and do leaders share the same sense of urgency as Prime Minister Tusk?
The European Union as a whole definitely shares the same level of urgency. However, sometimes we see the lack of action across the member states to act with this spirit. And therefore, we have to see how far this position or this spirit will be shared, and we have to wait what comes up by the end of today and tomorrow and what we will read actually in the conclusions of the European Council.
We have more coming from Bart de Wever, who kind of seems to be the center character when it comes to the discussion about the frozen Russian assets. There's been a lot of back and forth when it came to Belgium and the release of the said assets. We've heard the Prime Minister of Belgium say that, quote, current guarantees do not meet our standards, and he also demanded for what he called unconditional guarantees. So do you think that the European Commission could do without Belgium? And if so, why, in making that very decision about releasing the assets?
I mean, first of all, we are not here speaking about releasing the assets directly. This is about using this asset as a background to then raise the loan for Ukraine. The European Commission has already went forward with very decisive step, which is freezing these assets indefinitely, given the foundations from the Treaty of the European Union, which could go ahead with a qualified majority voting where Belgium or the other single member states could not block this from moving forward. Now, what we are having at stake is this agenda that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen already put into the play in her State of the Union address. So this is a politically charged topic, politically charged action, and it very much will show what will be the outcome of today's and tomorrow's summit, to what extent the European Union can really hold the ground and find the common position of using those assets for raising up the loan for Ukraine. However, if, and we know that Belgium very much stands in the line with its hesitations, then we saw the plan B floating, which is instead of using those assets as a basis for raising the loan, that some member states, including Belgium or the others, would instead push for common borrowing of the European Union. However, here again, we have the division, right? Germany very much backs up Commission's proposal to use the loans without going ahead with the common borrowing, while some other member states, push forward toward the common borrowing. We have to see what the Council will agree on today. Obviously, given the situation, given strategic urgency that we're seeing in Ukraine at the front lines, the first option, which is using Russia's frozen assets as the basis for raising up the loan, carries this urgency in it. So if this doesn't go ahead, perhaps EU member states again do not agree on the urgency and the spirit that you refer to by the statements of Donald Tusk.
One of the key premises of the meeting, and something that the message that we've heard being repeated over and over again, is the message of unity. That the European family, the European bloc, has to show unity when it comes to making these decisions in order to be able to push them forward. Do you think that there might be unity found over the next 2 days within the EU to be able to make those significant decisions?
I have high hesitations given all the statements we have heard from Belgium, and this is already recurring. So I do have my hesitations on that, although I don't want to speculate because we really have to see what comes out of the council meetings. But I doubt that we find the unity here.
Do you think that there is any sort of leverage or anything that that you could potentially offer to Bart de Wever to make him rethink once again? Because he mentioned, as I said, as I quoted, he demanded unconditional guarantees. But what are these? What would have to be offered for him to change his mind?
Indeed, and this is a very good question, and this is a very complex question because the European Commission's proposal has already been discussed by legal experts, and according to the legal lawyers, which I am not, this should offer sufficient guarantees for the member state like Belgium. And there were other, commentaries have been circulating this week with the legal experts that saying that the guarantees put forward are sufficient. Indeed, so this is to be asked within Belgium what are the other guarantees that the country may require, and whether it is something that the European Commission can still rework on the text. But to explain for the audience, the proposal has already been reworked. And this is why I'm saying if this is not acceptable for Belgium, we may simply not see Belgium's support for this text. But let's see what comes out of the Council.
Do you think that Russia is watching this meeting taking place today closely? Is the Kremlin watching closely, considering the recent lawsuit that was being filed by Moscow and the conversation around what is eventually a massive amount of money?
Of course, Kremlin is, and Moscow, President Putin would be watching this very, very closely. We know that this is very much happening because any time this was put on the table, Putin would, show either through bombings, continued bombings of civilians and, military energy infrastructure of Ukraine, or, bringing these things or getting attention away from this by the elevated or some meetings with President Trump or the United States, or twisting the narrative against, Ukraine, which has been already suffering quite a lot with this full-scale invasion that Russia has initiated. So, of course, Kremlin follows very, very closely. And the only thing is that because of the Russia's withdrawal from, the several international organizations, International Court of Justice, these jurisdictions simply that Russia may be threatening are not, these jurisdictions cannot be used by Russia. So the arguments raised, from Kremlin simply lack the evidence when it comes to any concerns or any objections for using those frozen Russian assets. It's just, as Kremlin does it very well, it's bluffing, it's manipulation, and it's, of course, twisting the narrative. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you as a specialist on EU enlargement about the topic of Ukraine potentially joining the European Union and that proposal of having it joined by the 1st of January 2027. That's considering the time constraints. Do you think that's actually possible?
Well, it's very difficult to see what is possible given that country is at a full-scale war. What we've seen was the unprecedented progress the country has made despite being in a full-scale war, which is very much acknowledged by Brussels, by the member states of the European Union. If we read the enlargement reports that have been come out in Brussels in the beginning of November, we see timelines there where the European Commission thinks that, there are the prospects for the country to finishing somehow negotiations by the end of 2028, and potentially, could be ready potentially to be joining the European Union by 2030. This is a very general timeline, right? We have to see how country progresses, how merit-based approach is respected, and most importantly, what happens with a full-scale war, because country is at the war while we are asking the country to undertake all these reforms, which is, of course, very, very challenging. On the other hand, what we are expecting from this European Council is to see whether we will have at all conclusions on the enlargement. And why I'm pointing this out, because we saw that conclusions on Ukraine usually would come out with the signatories from the 26 member states because of the notorious opposition from Hungary to stand by those conclusions. But as this is the final summit of the year, we probably should have expect all the European Union member states coming together in 27 for the conclusions on enlargement, including on Ukraine. And I doubt if there is no agreement across all the member states, including Hungary, we may not even see conclusions on enlargement. But again, let's see what comes out by the end of the day.
Our time is coming to an end slowly here on the program, but I just wanted to finish off with this final question. With U.S. support for Ukraine becoming less predictable, let's use that word here, shall we? Do you think that today is going to be when part of Europe's credibility as a security actor within the region is going to be established?
Well, Europe's credibility as a security actor, not only today, but that has been, under the question mark, and that's been the testing, ground since the full-scale war has been started. So today, to that end, I mean, we see what comes out of the Council, but it is today, it is tomorrow, it is as long as, Europe has a big stake, which is, Ukraine fighting this unjust war for total, security of the European as a continent. And obviously, with the US withdrawal or hesitations or unpredictability, as you mentioned, this is further test whether Europe, European Union, coalition of the willing can definitely play the role that current urgency requires them to play today and later and before this council.
Thank you very much. Dr. Tinatin Akhvlediani, Research Fellow at the Center for European Policy, was my guest here on the program. Thank you once again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you back here for more in just a moment.